Welcome to Catholic Feedback. I'm your host, Keith Nestor. On this podcast, we connect the eternal truths of the Catholic faith with everyday life. Send in your questions and comments to feedback@catholicfeedback.com. This podcast is brought to you by Down to Earth Ministry, a ministry of stewardship, a mission of faith, and by the generous support of our patrons. For more information, please visit downtoearthministry.org. That's down, the number 2, earthministry.org. Let's get to it. Welcome to Catholic Feedback. I'm Keith Nestor. This is the podcast where we connect the eternal truths of the Catholic faith to everyday life. Today is kind of a different podcast because, well, we're not really talking about like theological issues specifically, but we are talking about one of the most important issues that relates to everything theologically. And I guess you could break this down into all kinds of truths about God and truths about Catholicism or whatever. But let me just tell you what we're going to talk about today, and you're probably going to be surprised. But today on the podcast, we're talking about dating from a Catholic perspective. I know, like, what do I know about dating? I've been married for 24 years or something like that. Yeah. And, so obviously it's been a long time for me to be in that world, but I'll tell you this, I've got kids that are in that world. So what I'm about to share with you are some of the tried and true things that I've shared with them. And now this is a podcast. I don't have any one specific person that I wanted to say this was their question because I've got several of them. So you know who you are, but several people have emailed me and said, Keith, can you please talk about dating from a Catholic perspective? Now, I know right now there's some people going, oh, you already blew it, Keith, because you're talking about dating, and you really shouldn't be talking about dating because Christians shouldn't date, they should court. So let me just clear this up. I'm not one of those people that thinks that if you take one thing and give it a different name, then all of a sudden now it goes from being a bad thing to a good thing, okay? And I kind of feel like that's a situation when people talk about dating versus courtship and courting, whatever that means. And here's why I say that. It's not because I think that what people mean when they talk about courting is bad or anything like that. It's just that the two ideas of what it means to say you're dating and what it means to say you're courting, that is so subjective to people. So first of all, I've seen people who are like, I'm never going to date, but I'm only going to court. And then when you look at their courting relationship, it's exactly like dating. And then I've seen people who do, the whole dating thing, and they don't care what they call it, but it looks a lot like courtship. So let's not get hung up on the terms. I've been asked to talk about dating, so that's what I'm going to talk about, but you could swap those out because I think what you're going to discover as you listen to me is that my view of what dating should be for Catholics, it's probably a pretty similar view to what many of you think of when you think of courtship. So let's first of all talk about what we mean when we say dating. What is it? And I think really the idea of dating in and of itself isn't that big a deal. What's important is the purpose of dating. What's it for? This is the key right here. Because if some people say, well, dating is bad, but courtship is good, well, I think it just depends. Now, the idea of courtship, I think, that is appealing is that courtship seems to be geared more towards the idea of finding a spouse for marriage, whereas dating seems to be culturally, anyway, understood to be just something that you do for fun. Now, my personal philosophy is this. I lean more toward the courtship style, but I don't insist that everybody calls it that. I believe, this is my opinion, I'm not pulling the Bible out, I'm not pulling the catechism out. This episode, you're just getting Keith's opinion, so you can take it or leave it. I think that the purpose of dating / courtship or whatever, maybe we should just call it dateship, just so that we're all clear on the same terms here. We'll just call it dating. The purpose of dating is preparation for marriage. That's the bottom line. Now, that in and of itself, like, what do you mean preparation for marriage? How are you supposed to prepare for marriage when you barely know somebody? So like, isn't the purpose of dating just to like get to know people and have fun with people and spend time with someone that you like? I'm going to go out and say, no, that's called friendship. Okay? This is a radical idea for some people I know, because for a lot of people out there, they think that when you want to get to know somebody and spend time with them and decide whether you like them, that the way you do that is you date them. But here's why that's a big problem. Because the expectations culturally around the idea of dating, or whatever you want to call it, they automatically put this romantic spin on things, or even some sort of like attachment to this, where now there's all these weird expectations that go along with it. So even if you just want to get to know somebody and you say, hey, let's go out on a date, and it's called a date and it's understood to be a date, now there's this weird expectation about things like, okay, well, am I allowed to spend time with more than one person? Do I have to pay if you're a guy for everything that we do? Is that expected? And then maybe the girl's like, well, am I expected to like let this guy kiss me goodnight because we went on a date? There's all these, and then, do I have to call the person the next day, or do I have to do this? Or like, there's all of this expectation put around that concept, which when you're just trying to get to know somebody or have fun or spend time together, hey, do that within the context of friendship. I think this is completely underlooked and underrated in our society today. We seem to have a struggle thinking that that men and women can do things together socially, even if it's just the two of them, because they want to get to know each other, without there being this like expectation of it being a date. And I think that we need to sort of recognize the difference between spending time with someone just for fun and hanging out with them and getting to know them and seeing if you are compatible with them and if you like them, versus like dating, where there is this preparation for marriage. Because remember, the purpose of dating is to prepare yourself for marriage. Now, what I'd like to do then, because that's the case, okay, let's talk about some best practices here. And this is where I'm going to give you, Keith's top 12 tips. Okay, you like these? For top 12 tips for how to have a successful mindset and dating experience. Okay? Are you ready? I know this is like a different kind of podcast, but I think it's kind of fun, especially from an old man like me, for some of you young kids out there that are looking into dating. Okay, and when I say young kids, let me just set the stage. Like our kids in my house, they weren't even allowed to even think about doing anything like that until they were 16. So there wasn't even spending any time with anybody from the opposite sex alone until they were, and then when they were 16 and they started doing that, it was still pretty guarded, because hey, I'm not letting some knucklehead just take my daughter out on a date if I don't know anything about him. Okay, well, she's 23 now, so I guess I can't really control that too much. But number one, okay, decide ahead of time what kind of person you want to be with. Okay, think about that. Now, you might say, well, duh, isn't that what everybody does? No, it's not. A lot of times what people do, honestly, is they just become attracted to somebody, and instantly they're like, oh my gosh, I'm attracted to this person, we must date. And maybe that person isn't anything like the kind of person that you would wind up with in marriage. Okay, so remember, the purpose of dating is to prepare yourself for marriage. So don't you think you ought to sit down ahead of time and make a list, or come up with some ideas of the kind of person that you want to be with before you ever date? Now, here's the kicker, right? You make your decisions about the kind of person you want to be with, and then you decide what are your non-negotiables. Okay? Now, let's be very clear about this. Okay? And I guess I should have started with this. I'm coming from a place in my own philosophy here, which I think is biblical, okay? That says that you should only date somebody that you should marry, and that you should not marry someone who's not compatible with you when it comes to your faith. Okay? So I'm not ever going to think it's a good idea for a Christian to date a non-Christian. Okay? That to me, that goes without saying, right? So then what about like, well, should a Catholic date a non-Catholic? I think that's a little bit trickier, and it's a little bit tougher to throw out a blanket statement. But I would just say, as a general rule, okay, as a general rule, that I would need some pretty hardcore, reasoning to get me to veer from this rule. If you're a practicing Catholic and that's important to you, then you should only date somebody else who's a practicing Catholic and that's important to them. Otherwise, you're asking for trouble. Now, I know there are plenty of people out there that are in marriages, let's say, that are what the church refers to as mixed marriages, okay? Where you have a Catholic married to a non-Catholic, and the church makes provision for that in certain situations to do those marriages. So I'm not. Don't hear me. Don't let me make you think that I'm saying something I'm not saying. I'm not saying that those people are in bad marriages or that that's not that they're like in trouble or something like that. I think some of them would tell you that, but I'm not going to make that blanket statement. But what I am going to say is this: if you're not in that situation already, then you shouldn't shoot for something that's less than what's going to be the best possible scenario in your mind. Because remember, we're not talking about people who are already married making decisions about what they're going to do. I'm talking about you're a person who's not dating anybody, and you're deciding right now, you're sitting down, and maybe you're making a list, and you're saying, what do I want the person that I end up marrying to be like? And then you make that list. You decide what are the non-negotiables. What are things that, because let's face it, you're not going to ever probably find the perfect person that's on your list that fulfills every category and checks every box. You're probably not going to. But some of those things can be negotiable. If you said, well, I really want a guy who's 6'3", and then you find a guy and he's great and everything's awesome, but he's only 6'1". Do you say, well, sorry, you were perfect except for you're 2 inches shorter than what I dreamed of in my brain? Of course not. Guys, same thing's true for you. If you've got this picture of this perfect woman in your mind and she looks a certain way and acts a certain way and talks a certain way, but then you meet this other person, you're feeling compatible with them, but maybe she's not exactly what you always envision. Some things are negotiable. Some things probably aren't even that big a deal. But other things are non-negotiable. Things like they have to be a person of faith. They have to share your values. They have to be people that are, within a suitable age range for you. Okay, so let's just say this. Okay, if someone doesn't fulfill those non-negotiables, then you shouldn't marry them, which means, guess what? You shouldn't date them. So, for example, we'll pick something that's kind of arbitrary. Let's say age. Okay, let's say you decide that you want to marry somebody relatively close to your age. Let's say within 5 years of your age. Let's say you're a 23-year-old girl, and some guy who's 50 decides he wants to date you. He might be a great guy, but he's 50. And you might say, I don't want to date somebody who's 50. I want to date somebody a little more closer to my age. You're not passing judgment on him as a person. You're just saying that, hey, you sort of fall outside of the range of person I'm looking for. Okay. Now I picked that example because it's pretty harmless example to talk about how old somebody is because they can't control that. Now, I know out there somebody's probably going, but wait a minute. My friend's husband is 20 some years older than I'm not judging that. If that's what you want to do, hey, whatever. I'm just saying, if you make your decision, and it's your list. It's not my list. It's your list. You decide the things that go into your list and then stick to it. That's all I'm saying. You know what that's going to do? That's going to keep you from wasting time with somebody who you already know you could never marry. But wait, Keith, how could I not know that I couldn't marry this person if I never date them, if I never spend time with them? Well, again, I'm talking about things that are unchangeable, non-negotiables. Well, what if this guy I like is he's not a Christian? But what if, Keith, what if through my awesome powers of persuasion and the Holy Spirit, what if someday he could become a Christian? Well, great. Then be his friend until that happens. You can still use your powers of persuasion and all that. The Holy Spirit can still work within the context of your friendship. The Holy Spirit isn't calling you, hey, I really need this guy to be saved. Please go date him. Okay? You can do all that within the context of friendship. Then when he becomes a Christian and that's something that's been demonstrated in his life and all that, then date him. Okay? But if someone right now doesn't fulfill those requirements on things that are non-negotiable, sorry, they're off the list. Don't do it. Okay. Number 2, remember that you attract what you are. So here's the deal. A lot of people make these lists and you look at their list and it's like, well, you're nothing like that list. And you say, I know, but my perfect wife or my perfect husband will be like that. Well, this law of kind of social behavior, and by the way, it's not a hard and fast rule. I mean, you hear the adage, opposites attract. Okay, that's true. But you have to make yourself attractable to the kind of person that you want to be with. And typically, you kind of attract what you are. So if you're a person who is, let's just say, for example, you're into high adventure outdoor activities and you want to be a person who goes like mountain biking and rock climbing and spends time out in the woods, and that's what you're looking for in a spouse. Well, if if you spend all your time in the library reading books or on a computer, then you're probably not going to be attracted or be attractable to a person who does those things that you want to do. You have to be around what you want to become and who you want to be with. And you have to essentially recognize that you're going to attract what you are. Now, here's where the rubber meets the road on this when it comes to your faith. Let's say you're a person and you're like, I really want a good Christian spouse. Okay? I want a person who loves the Lord. But in your own life, you spend way more time going out to bars than you do going to church. You spend way more time doing the things of the world than you do things of your faith. What makes you think for 5 seconds that somebody who is really on fire for their faith is going to see you and go, yeah, that person is somebody I could spend time with? You see, remember, dating and getting ready for all this is a lot about making yourself the kind of person that would be attractable to the person that you want. Okay, so you're going to be attracted to somebody based on how they are and what they're into, and the flip side is true. So consider what's going on in your own life. If you want to attract someone who has a certain lifestyle, then you have to sort of have that lifestyle. Girls, if you want a strong leader in your family, like to be the leader of your household, okay, then maybe you should hang out with dudes that aren't just sitting in their parents' basement playing video games all day long. Maybe you should be the kind of person that a guy like that's going to look at and go, oh my goodness, she's way out of my league. Not, hey, cool, this girl over here is she doesn't care that I just waste my life playing video games. She's super chill. What difference does it make? No, you want to be the kind of person that's going to be compatible with the kind of person you want to be with. Okay, does that make sense? Your job isn't to find someone that you think is cute and then turn them into your ideal mate. Okay, your job is to work on yourself and your own level of holiness and your own level of maturity and your own level of like the kind of life you want to live. And then guess what? Someone who's compatible with that will be attracted to you, and you'll be around people like that, and it'll work out. Okay, number 3. This is a big one. Now, let's just say that you find someone and you kind of are interested in them. Number 3 is this: begin with friendship. You'll learn much of what you need to know about a person when you spend time with them as a friend. Okay? You're going to know about them. And in some ways, you'll get to know them a little bit better because let's face it, when people are in that weird sort of I like you, do you like me kind of phase and we're dating or whatever, people aren't really themselves 100% of the time. There's this, front that we put on to try to appear a certain way, So guys are going to act a certain way based on trying to attract this girl, and a girl might act a certain way or whatever to attract this guy to impress him, and whatever. What I'm saying is when you begin as friends and there's not all these weird expectations and there's not all these weird issues going along with that, you find out what a person's just really like. Because you know how they say that it takes a few months, maybe 5 or 6 months into a dating relationship before everybody drops their little facades and people just become who they really are. What I'm saying is that start with that in friendship and then build towards dating. Don't start with, hey, I just met this guy at this party last night and he asked me out and we're going to go on a date. That's the exact backwards way of doing this, okay? Now, what do? You meet this guy, he says, hey, let's hang out. Say, okay, great. I would love to spend some time with you as, in friendship. And guess what, girls? It's totally okay for you to say that to a guy. And guys, guess what? It's totally okay for you to say that to a girl as well. You can do things together like that, okay? Start with friendship and then pay attention to how that person acts. Watch how they treat other people. There's a good adage that if a person is nice to you when you're having dinner with them, if they're nice to you but mean to the server, then they're not a good guy or they're not a good girl. Pay attention to how people treat those who are serving them or those that they're not expecting anything in return from. Pay attention to that. Don't just pay attention to how a guy treats you. Pay attention, or how a girl treats you. Pay attention to how they treat other people who they're not trying to impress. And you see that stuff in friendship probably a little bit more easily than if you're on a date. Now I know some of you are like, oh my gosh, does that mean that everybody I'm friends with right now is evaluating me and watching me to see if I'm somebody they want to date? Hey, hopefully, but that's okay, right? That's a good thing. You should be walking around thinking to yourself, I'm being evaluated right now, and people are watching my life to see the kind of person I am and to see how important my faith is to me and how I treat people. You should always live like that. Okay, that's a good thing for you. Okay, so number 4, when you want to take the next step with someone you are interested in, tell them. Just tell them. Don't play games. Don't make them wonder. Don't guess. Now, remember, this doesn't mean that it has to be some huge production and you need to like make a sign or, buy them something or whatever. It's like this big thing or we're going to put this on Facebook or whatever. But I think it's important for you to communicate that desire to the other person. So let me just tell you what that looks like. So let's say you've met this person, you've been hanging around with them for a while and in the context of friendship, and you're starting, you don't see any red flags, you don't see any non-negotiables on the list. Maybe they're not perfect or you don't know how that all is working out, but you know right off the top of your head, there's nothing that would prevent you from being with that person. And you're sort of wanting to explore that. I think it's totally cool to just say that. To say something like this, hey, I would really like to get to know you in our relationship at a different step, because I think that maybe there could be something here between us beyond friendship. And I don't know about you, but I'd like to explore that. What do you think? That's all I'm talking about. I'm not like, well, let me sing you a song or write you a poem or something like it. Doesn't, you don't want to you want to go slowly, okay? You want to take things slowly. You don't want to overwhelm somebody with you've been friends for a while and it's like, hey, guess what? I've decided that you're the person I'm going to marry, so let's start dating. Girls, if you say that to a guy, he's probably going to freak out. Guys, if you say that to a girl, she's probably going to think you're crazy, okay? So you don't have to do all that. You might be thinking that. You might be thinking, wow, this person's amazing. I could totally see myself with that person. That's okay. But you don't have to make that the condition of, taking the relationship to the next level. But talk about it. Be open. Say stuff. Don't play games. Don't sort of ask her friend or whatever, this or that, or hey, could you say this or what? Just be upfront, be mature, be an adult about it. Just talk. Okay. That kind of goes along with number 5. This is in the context. So let's say now this is beginning and you have this relationship that's now crossed the line into courting or dating, whatever you want to call it. But now we're clearly in a different place. We're in a place where both people are romantically interested in each other and are involved in some sort of exclusivity there, where they're not talking to other people and dating other people and doing all that. They're in this relationship. Number 5 is this: be intentional and clear about things. Be intentional and clear about things. And I'm talking about how you're feeling, what's going on in the relationship. As you talk about the relationship, be intentional. Say, look, I really would like to spend more time with you, or I'm really interested in this, and make it clear. You don't want that other person wandering around like going, does he really like me, or is he like completely bored with me, or does she think I'm okay, or does she like think I'm a slob? You don't want that other person having to be insecure or questioning whether or not you feel a certain way. You need to talk through things, but at the same time, you don't want to overwhelm them with every thought that you have that's just like fleeting through your mind. So you don't want to like sit down with them on your third date and go, okay, here's the deal. I've already planned out where our kids are going to live and what we're going to do, and I've decided that we're going to do this in 15 years. And you don't want to. You might be thinking that, but be smart about that. You don't have to share every little feeling that you have all the time, but it is important that you're clear and intentional about things that are important in this relationship. And here's where I really want to say about that. If somebody does something that you don't like repeatedly, like if there's a pattern of behavior or some sort of issue in their personality or the way they act that is causing you an issue, that's something that you need to be intentional about. Don't just think it's going to get resolved on its own or that somehow it's going to change. Okay? You have to be intentional about things and share how you're feeling so that the other person always knows where you stand. Now, I know this breaks every rule that I'm just going to talk to you guys from a guy's perspective, okay? This breaks every rule that guys have been told about how you get a girl to like you, right? And I don't think this is a secret to the girls, but guys are told, like, you never let the girl know that you like her. Because if you let her know that you like her, then she's not going to like you. That's the kind of advice a lot of guys received from other guys about dating. Be a jerk and she'll like you even more. Stuff like that. You know why? Because guess what? Out in the world, that's how it is. Out in the world, you ever hear the old adage that nice guys finish last? In the world's way, it's probably true. But remember, we're not doing this the world's way. The world's way would never look anything like what I'm talking to you about. The world's way is this. You see somebody that you think is cute, you hook up with them, and you become extremely physical with them without any commitment at all. And then when you're tired of them, you just move on. And if you can sort of tolerate each other and hang around, then you do that. And then eventually you move in together and you live as married couples, but without the commitment because, hey, you might change your mind later or find somebody you like better. So then that's the world's way. We're not talking about that. We're talking about doing things God's way. And we don't want people having to solve mysteries and riddles in these relationships. We want people to be clear and to understand where they stand. So be intentional and be clear about how you think things are going in the relationship. Okay? Number 6, build your relationship around the faith. That's huge. If your relationship is built around who you are as a Catholic, then you're going to be so far ahead of the curve on this. What the problem is that a lot of people, they get into these whirlwind romances, these relationships, and then it's like somebody goes, yeah, you know what, I should probably talk about the whole church thing because I'm this and I'm that. And then it's like, wait a minute, now you want to start talking about going to church and all this stuff and not really working out. But if you start with this relationship being built on the faith, it's way easier than if you try to add it in later. Okay? So begin with having your relationship be built around faith. You know what that means? That means you pray together. Right? And that doesn't mean just bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts, which we're about to receive from thy bounty through Christ our Lord. That means you actually pray, like you pray a rosary together, or you go to adoration together, or, things like that, where it's like an intentional thing where you are saying to each other, hey, our relationship needs to be centered around our faith. Talk about God. Because remember, your job in this relationship is to help bring that other person to sainthood. It's to help them grow in the Lord. And I know, again, this is totally not the way the world works, but this is the way that God works. The purpose of marriage is to help each other in our journey toward holiness in an intimate and unique way that only a spouse can do. And if that's your preparation is this dating or courtship relationship, then guess what? That doesn't start when you get married. That can start the minute that you enter into this relationship. So have that mindset that the purpose of this relationship is to help us grow in holiness together. And that's a whole lot easier when you build your relationship around the faith. Okay? That's very, very important. Okay, now let's talk about the question that everybody wants to have. Okay, I used to be a youth pastor, so I got this question asked to me, probably 15, 20 times a year. How far is too far when it comes to physical stuff? Okay, now everybody can sort of recognize the fact that, of course, any sexual activity is completely off the table for people who aren't married. And hey, you're not married until the priest goes like this and pronounces that you're married, okay, in the church. Until then, you're not married. So until then, keep this in mind. The person that you're with could very well likely become somebody else's spouse later. So here's what I'm going to say about the physical stuff, okay? And I'm not going to give you a list of this is allowed, that's not allowed. I'm not going to do that because I don't think we should be legalistic about this. What we should be is holy about this, okay? And we should be wise about this. So anything that's leading you into sin, into a tempting, sinful situation, don't do it. Okay, you might go, well, hey, I can do all this and not sin. Give me a break. No, you can't. Think about this principle, okay? You shouldn't do anything with the person you're dating that you wouldn't want somebody else to do to your future spouse. Think about that. And you should never do anything with that person that you would be ashamed to tell your future spouse, or get this, their future spouse. You don't want there to be this weirdness in marriage where when one of you says, "Oh, hey, see that person over there? I used to date that person." And now instantly in their mind they're going, "Oh my gosh, does that mean that they had sex? Does that mean this and that mean that?" And look, I'm not here to talk about what it means in life to have sinned even sexually and then be forgiven and cleansed and renewed. That's a different podcast, okay? But what I'm talking about is if you're on this side of life and you haven't done those things, because remember, we're talking about something that you're probably not into right now with regards to dating. But even if you are, right? If you are at this place where you're beginning this relationship, make those rules right now. Make those decisions together that, we're not going to do anything with each other physically that's going to lead us into sin, or that's going to be something that we would have to be ashamed of to tell our spouses, our future spouses, because, hey, the truth is this relationship might not work out. So keep that in mind. Okay, number 8, have fun together. Have fun together. Now, I know that's probably the easiest one because, of course, when you're in a new dating relationship, everything's fun, right? Oh, we could just, walk around a parking lot and it would be so wonderful just to be together. And we don't have to. I love it. It's like new dating relationship people are like the craziest people that you ever run into. They're just so like in la la land. And they think that all they need to do is just stare at each other and look in each other's eyes, and they don't have to do anything. We don't have to do anything. We can just sit and talk forever. Okay, great. But what I'm saying is, for the health of your relationship, you have to be like exploring new things and interests together. Learn how to do something new together. Because this is how you find out whether you're really compatible. It isn't just when you're infatuated with somebody and you can stare at them all day long. That isn't going to help you. It's when you start living life together a little bit by trying new things and seeing if you guys are compatible with this, or what you like to do for fun together. Because, hey, guess what? Eventually, you're going to want to try some stuff. You're going to get bored of just staring at each other or being on the phone all night. You hang up. No, you hang up. No, you hang up. No, you hang up. Like, eventually, you're going to be like, all right, we done? Boom. Okay? Just kidding. But the fact is this. If your relationship isn't built on common interests and things that you are doing, and it's not headed somewhere, it's going to be tough. Okay. Number 9, give each other the benefit of the doubt. And don't fight about stupid stuff. What I mean when I talk about fighting about stupid stuff is this. Well, last week when you picked me up, you told me I looked pretty, like as soon as I got in the car. But then today, when I got in the car, like you didn't say anything. And then I had to say, "Do you think I look pretty?" And the guy's like, "Oh man." And I'm in serious trouble for that, right? So you don't like, maybe he was busy. Or, if you're a guy and you say to the girl, you're like, "Hey, next weekend, we should go do something fun together." And then you tell him, "Oh, I already have plans with my friends." And he's like, "Oh, well, you always choose them over me," or something like that. Don't fight about stupid stuff. Always give each other the benefit of the doubt. "Hey, you didn't text me back right away. I saw that you read my text, but you didn't respond right away. So what's up with that?" Why do we always assume the worst? We always go, "Oh, well, that must mean this terrible thing." Give each other the benefit of the doubt. Don't get hung up over stupid stuff that is probably no big deal. You see, a lot of fights that happen between people who are dating and people who are married a lot of times are stuff that comes from not giving each other the benefit of the doubt. We assume that they meant something, that they said a certain way when they say, "Well, did you mean it like that?" "No, I didn't." "Yes, you did." Or maybe they forgot about something, or maybe something slipped their mind, or whatever it might be. People are people. Nobody's perfect. Don't fight about stupid stuff, and give each other the benefit of the doubt. That's very, very important in a relationship. Okay, number 10, and this kind of goes along with that. Number 10 is this: apologize and forgive quickly. The scripture tells us that we should not let the sun go down on our anger. Okay. And I think that's true in relationships a lot of times. Now, that doesn't mean that you're never going to fight and that you're always going to be like, oh, it's okay. Oh, no problem. Sometimes people do dumb stuff and there's going to be issues in there and there's going to have to be real healing and repentance and work ethic. That's okay. But what I'm saying is, in general, you shouldn't be like a defensive person. If somebody's offended by something you did, or they got mad at you for something, you shouldn't always get angry back and get all defensive and well, what about you? And blah 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 blah. If you did something to hurt somebody's feelings in the relationship and they expressed that to you, then apologize for that. And then if you express that to somebody and they apologize to you, forgive them. Okay? Now, that'll make things way easier. You might go, "Oh yeah, but it keeps happening and it's a pattern." Well, guess what? If it's a pattern of behavior that's troubling to you, then you can forgive that person and then stop dating them. That's totally okay. You don't have to stay in that situation. That's part of what this is all about. Is getting to know this person well enough in this relationship to know whether or not this is going to be a good candidate for your spouse, to be your spouse. And if they do stuff to you and it drives you nuts and then they apologize and then you forget, but they just keep doing it over and over again, then guess what? You might have to consider that when you decide whether you want this relationship to continue. Okay, 11. Continue to spend time with your own friends. Don't become obsessed with each other to where you have to be together 24/7 all the time, even in the beginning. Continue to do that. Now, understand that if you have friends that are of the opposite sex that you are, that might get a little weird for the person you're dating, okay? Which is just one of those things that people have to understand. So, so fellas, you're dating a girl, you can't say to her, "Hey, I'm going to go out to a movie with this other girl and we're just friends. It's okay. It's cool." That's probably not going to work out, okay? But dudes hang out with dudes, girls hang out with girls. That's okay. What you don't want is a situation like this, where once you guys start dating, now it's just always assumed that every waking moment of your life that's not devoted to school or work or whatever, you are like this, always together. You don't want that. You want to be able to have your own life still in the midst of this relationship. You want to be growing closer together, but you don't want to start like this, because you need to have your own perspective and your own life and your own friends. Now, if you're all in a big friend group, that's fine. But guys, there's going to be times when your guy friends want to go out and do stuff with just you. Do it. It's totally cool. Same with the girls. They're going to want to go do girly things together. That's totally cool too. Still have your own kind of identities. The problem we have is like we get so obsessed with each other that we sort of like lose our own individuality and our own identity. It gets wrapped up in this other person so much that it's like, what? You Friday night, you're going out with your friends? Well, what about me? What about me? I thought, now don't break plans with the person you're dating to go do stuff with your friends. But if you have plans with your friends, or you shouldn't have to worry like, hey, if I make plans with my friends, then I'm going to be in serious trouble with the person I'm dating, because it's just always assumed that we can never not be together. That's like bad, okay? That's borderline obsession. You don't need that. Even when you're married, it's not going to be like that. You're still going to be able to do things with your friends when, different things. Now, it's different when you're living together and in marriage and you have all that going on. But as dating couples, hey, still have your friends. Still do things that are fun with your friends. Okay, last one, number 12, break up nicely. If it doesn't work out, hey, that's okay. Now, I know that people's hearts get broken, and I know that there might come a time in a relationship where someone decides that this isn't working out and the other person is devastated and crushed. I get that. But when it's time for this relationship to end, okay, it has to end in a good way. As much as depends on you, okay? The scripture says, live at peace with others as much as depends on you. Now, if you break up with some guy because for whatever reason, and you just sit down with them and you tell them, listen, this isn't going to work out anymore for whatever reason. And keep in mind this, when you're dating somebody, you don't owe them the rest of your life. You don't have to feel badly about it. And that's part of that communication. It's not, oh, well, we're dating, so that means that this is forever. You're not engaged. You're not married, you're dating, which means that at any time, you get to decide, based on how things are going and how you're feeling about things, whether or not you want this relationship to continue or not. And guess what? If you don't want it to, you're completely okay to do that. You're well within your rights. But it doesn't give you the right to be a jerk or to be nasty. Okay? You should have a breakup experience that, yes, it's going to be painful, probably for both people at some level. But that pain doesn't have to turn into personal attacks and, unloving, mean, sinful, rude behavior. Okay? Even if it goes badly, you can just say, look, this isn't going to work out, and I just don't want to participate in this relationship anymore. I'm sorry. That's it. And let me say this. If you're on the receiving end of that, be man enough or woman enough to accept that. Yeah, it might be painful. It's probably going to be. You're going to feel rejected. You're going to feel hurt. But have the personal confidence and the personal fortitude enough to be able to receive that and understand that's always a possibility in dating. And if you don't think you're mature enough to handle that, then don't date. If you're not mature enough to handle somebody dumping you, if that would just completely devastate your life and turn you into a complete disaster, then guess what? You're not mature enough to date. That might right there be the most important thing that some of you hear in this podcast. But it's true. Because remember, your identity is not dependent on the person that you're dating. Your identity is dependent on Christ and who you are in the Lord. And if somebody else is feeling called in a different direction or just flat out doesn't want to date you anymore, for whatever reason, you have to be okay with that eventually. I'm not saying it's not going to hurt. I'm not saying you're not going to be like, oh, thank you. But you can't return evil for that. They're just being honest with you. And you got to be okay with that. You can't hold the other person hostage. You can't get all mad about it and freak out. Yes, it can hurt, but let it go. Friend, if that's happened to you, yeah, it's a painful thing, but let it go. Be okay with that. It just means that God has a different person for you. Let me tell you, the worst thing in the world is not getting dumped by someone when they're dating you that you really like. That's not the worst thing in the world. The worst thing in the world is if you marry the wrong person, okay? That's the worst thing in the world, okay? And when I say the world, I mean within this context. There's nothing worse than that. And if you're like, oh, please don't leave me, and you control that other person and you manipulate them emotionally and you make them stay with you and you put a guilt trip on them and you do all this stuff and you just sort of work them until they agree to stay with you, then guess what? You think that's going to make things better? It's only going to make things worse. You're just delaying the inevitable. And you're inviting more hurt and pain into your life. I tell you what, I'm glad I got a chance to talk about this because here's the thing. I think that this can be an awesome experience for those of you that are single and able to date. And of course, in the Catholic Church, we have this understanding of who is available to be married in the Catholic Church and who's not. And if that's your situation, if you are like, okay, I'm able to be married in the Catholic Church, and you're out there ready to date people and you're looking for that person, then it can be exciting and a fun experience. It can be really cool to see what God can do. But you got to do it the right way. I hope this has been helpful to you. If you've got different tips or you think I'm crazy, then hey, I'm 100% okay with that. Nothing I said in this podcast today, is a direct quote from the Bible or from the Catechism, except for the verses I quoted. But these 12 tips, these are just my best opinions, my best practices for what I think that you should do. And why am I saying this? Because I was asked to, okay? I didn't just come in and go, I'm going to tell everybody about how they should date. Okay, these are messages and emails that I've been receiving. So I hope that helps you guys. I hope this has been helpful to all of you people out there who are living in this dating world. My heart's desire for you is that everything you do, you step into with holiness and purity, and that you recognize that even though we didn't really talk about Catholic beliefs, so to speak, these are Catholic principles that apply to our lives in these very specific ways, because at the end of the day, we want to live for God in all things, especially in our relationships with each other. And if we follow what God says, we live according to God's way versus the world's way, then we know it's going to work out for the best. Thanks so much for watching, for listening. Please share this podcast with someone we think it would be helpful for them. And I thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you back here next week on Catholic Feedback. Take care. Thanks for listening to Catholic Feedback with Keith Nestor. Send in your questions and comments to feedback@catholicfeedback.com. This podcast is brought to you by Stewardship, a mission of faith, and is also supported by our team at patreon.com/Keith Nestor. Please consider joining our support team. Catholic Feedback is a production of Down to Earth Ministries. For more information about Down to Earth or to bring me to your parish or event, visit down2earthministry.org. See you next time.